Hey everybody, welcome to the Pullbox Pod. I'm Mark.
And
And,
I am Monk.
and we are here to talk to you about comic books and probably just some general life stuff.
Yeah, I love me some good old comic books and general life stuff.
Yeah.
Me and Mark have known each other for a very long time. It's got
Over
to be coming over 10 years, right?
It's over 10 years now. We were 2010s when we met.
And were we into comic books then? I can't really remember. I got into
We
comics in like,
we I think that we were, but we just living in Taiwan, I don't think we ever went and looked for a comic book store.
oh, that's right, everybody. We met in Taiwan. Uh,
Yeah.
We were doing school over there. No, I remember I bought my first ever comic book in Taiwan in Taipei 101 at the
Yeah.
bookstore there. It was an
That's right.
Avengers comic. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
By
right.
Michael Brian Bendis. I actually rebought those comics recently because I'm just like it was an Avengers and New Avengers series that he Michael Brian Bendis was doing with John Romita Jr.'s art. And like what a great introduction to comics because Michael Bendis is an amazing comic book writer, and John Romita Jr. He's just classic comic book art. So yeah, having that as my first introduction into the world of comics. I wasn't planning on talking about the first comics I
No,
ever
that's
owned,
great.
but what about yours? Do you remember yours? I mean, you probably got yours when you were little, eh?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was a kid, me and my brother used to walk to the comic book shop in downtown of our hometown, and I swear the first comic I ever bought was probably a Batman comic, but
Hmm,
I was under the age of 5, so I don't really remember exactly what it was, but I
that's
was
cool.
super into all the DC stuff at that time, and I loved X-Men at that time. I actually think it was the animated series of X-Men that got me into reading comic books because I was like, "Oh, this show's so cool!" And then like the animated Spider-Man show came out as well, and
Yeah.
that was kind of my kind
That's
of
interesting
foray.
because
Yeah,
I have another friend who also got into comics because of the X-Men animated series. So it's really cool to me that like because I got into the comics based like because of the Avengers movies. And I was never
yeah,
really I mean I was into like comic books and stuff like any kid growing up in America is into comic books,
yeah,
because like you like Batman, you like the Hulk, Spider-Man, like all kind of the classics, whatever.
yeah,
But to actually go out and buy a comic, it's so interesting that they need all this other mediums to point back to the source material to get people to be the most involved with that. Isn't that
yeah,
interesting?
yeah. No, it is like in the whole comic book world too, just like even going back in its earliest histories, it's just so like vast now. And I love that like we're kind of in this place where we're watching the MCU try to blend it all together.
Mm,
It's because they
yeah,
just have so much material to work with.
I know, and that's one of the shortcomings of something like the MCU is that you can't sit and you can't spend 60 years telling all these stories to build and having individual issues within arcs, and there's just so much time and to tell stories that way. But now they're trying to condense it and all that fun stuff. But anyways, before we go farther down the MCU rabbit hole, which I'm sure we could spend a lot of
Spend the
time on,
whole
do
we could spend the whole thing on it. Yeah.
you want to dive into some comic books?
Let's dive into some comic books.
So
You want to
okay,
start us off?
yeah, man. I two things I want to say before we get into this. The name of the podcast is the Pool Box Pals with Mark and Monk, and just want to say thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us for this. And our plan is just to talk about comics that we're reading. Mark and I spend, every Wednesday we either call each other or text each other and asking, what's in your pool box this week? What are you looking forward to reading? And
Yeah.
we figured we'd milk that for content and and yeah, and just kind of share it with you guys and see what you're reading and hear good recommendations and because you can't read it all, but it's fun to talk about with your friends, and it's so nice to you're like the only guy I know besides me who reads comics in my like sphere of influence who like actually goes to the comic book store
Yeah.
on a regular basis. So it's nice to be able to sit down and like chat with you and yeah, to
But
be
yeah,
going over this stuff.
people who go to comic book shops these days for comics, I think, are a rare breed. I think most people go to comic book shops these days for Pokemon cards or Funko Pops.
Or like, yeah, or well, that's I always say this about the comic book store that I go to, that I feel like I'm the lamest nerd when I go there, because
Oh,
everyone is
totally.
there to buy like the really cool like board game stuff, or like magic cards or Pokemon cards or whatever, and I'm just
Yeah,
looking at these cool comic books, and they're like, you're so lame, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I need to improve my nerdiness, but
yeah. I've just embraced it, like,
yeah, I mean, what are you gonna
um,
do?
because
I
also
really like the owners and the people that work there, so I love chatting with them. So that always makes it a good time for me.
yeah, the people at my comic book shop are very like the manager, she's very brass tacks, so just very, very forward with everything that she says. And like if you catch her on a good day, you can have a great conversation. But if it's like a regular day, it's just like down to business. Here's your comics, get out. Like, she doesn't
Well,
tell you to
I
get
mean,
out, but it's just like she's very
yeah.
short in her speech. But
How
I
many
really enjoy
conversations are you gonna have about the Silver Surfer before you're just like, I don't care anymore? You
it.
know,
Yeah,
just get your fun little books and get out.
yeah.
But speaking of a fun little book, let's just start this off. I want to talk about a comic that it actually just recently wrapped up. I think within the last month or two.
Okay.
But it's called Not All Robots. This is a variant
Oh yeah.
issue number one, kind of. I mean, the American Gothic, I think is the name of this. So it's by Mark Russell, and art is by Mike D. Diato Jr. and Lee Lowridge. Um, I have actually been a big fan of uh, I think both. I've read a little bit of Mark Russell before. I can't remember at the moment off the top of my head what, but Mike Diodato Jr. I am a big fan of his art. It's very. I mean, I believe this is him on the cover here, but it's very kind of very realistic and kind of gothic and dark. I don't have it open at the moment, but if I did, it's yeah, it's very real and very just I'm gonna say heavy. It's very like ink heavy. It's very dark.
Mm,
Um, but the premise of the comic book is that it's like set in the year 2065 or something like that, like in the future, and everyone has their own like robot that has AI, and that robot goes out and has a job for the family, and so the robot is in charge of working and bringing home a wage. But because of this, a lot of the robots become bitter and jealous and envious of humans because they get to spend all their free time doing, whatever. And the robots are what know that they needed to exist because human beings had like screwed up the planet so bad that they needed to have somebody come in and do it. So the robots, it's very funny and it's very satirical and very on the nose, and just kind of being like, listen, we know you screwed up the planet, and but it's not our fault, that's your fault. So why are we having to work to do all these things to make sure the planet comes along? But yeah, the first volume just finished up. I would really recommend checking it out. It's from I always say AWA Studios or Upshot Studios.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, and so they'll definitely be doing a trade paperback for that. And no spoilers, but it's definitely going to look like there's going to be a volume two, or at least looks like there could be volume two. So if you
That's good.
enjoy the story, there's going to be more stuff for you to check out. And yeah, I don't really have anything else more to say about it other than once it comes back out, it's definitely going to be in my pool box. And I just even the name, Not All Robots, I think that's
Yeah.
even satirical of the time. I just think, it's one thing I'll talk about on this podcast is I think something that's so important to a pool box is you're looking forward to it. You're getting excited like you're a little
Oh
kid in
yeah.
the comic book shop. Like this is definitely one of those comics that when I knew that was in my pool box, I'm like, oh, I'm looking forward to this because it's going to be just a good,
Yeah.
solid issue. I
Yeah.
hate fluff. I hate kind of just middling issues, and I never really got this with that one. It was a good issue every time. I think there was four or five, no five, yeah, or six, somewhere in that area. But trade paperback will be out soon. I'm sure. Check that out.
All right.
But how about you, Mark? You got anything you want to talk about?
Yes, I sure do. At the top
Okay.
of my list, I have, and I seriously, this is probably my favorite series that's out right now. And Volume One of the trade paperback comes out March 16th. So if you want to get caught up on it, there's a good opportunity. But the series is called Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, and this is actually, I think, cover two. Every cover has a different character who is actually introduced into that issue. So like on the cover of the first one, which I should have just had that one ready to go. But being so unprepared, so amateur.
That's okay.
Right.
I only had issue one, and that was a
There we
variant
go.
even. Oh my goodness, you
There it
got it.
is. Whoa.
Got it. Okay, yeah, it's all nice and shiny.
What in the like? Do you see the bricks coming through on that?
I do. How does that work?
I don't know
That's
why that's doing that.
very.
But anyways, and like
Anywho,
this guy also like the main character. Man,
hmm
gosh
he's
dang
an.
bricks. He looks like Benedict Wong.
I was gonna say, yeah, he's an Oriental gentleman, isn't he? Or an
Yeah,
Asian,
yeah, and
whatever.
so it's actually he's a Asian Canadian or I don't know,
Canadian, yeah,
Canadian
whatever
Asian.
that.
I don't know how they do things in Canada.
Well, it
So
would be Asian American, so probably Asian Canadian. Yeah,
yeah, sounds right.
he's a Canadian.
Yeah, but anyways, like
I
so
had
that's the
no.
main character. His name's Sunny, but he's just like this unassuming guy, um, who I don't know. He's just trying to get on the bus when the comic book starts out, but essentially he just gets drawn into this like dark web, like I guess list of jobs for hit jobs, and
Okay.
but like the first comic is essentially just him like going out. He bumps into this guy at the grocery store who sees all these supplies, and then he goes to like gets to his destination, and the people he went to go see. This is the only spoiler I'm going to give for the whole comic, but the people he's going to see are dead. And then the only thing left behind as evidence is all the supplies that he saw the guy buy at the grocery store. And
Okay.
so the rest of the series is basically Sunny, or Benedict Wong, because clearly they're making
An
a
attempt to make a
projection.
movie. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but so he kind of goes on and like he has a righteous thirst for vengeance because obviously it doesn't really cover these people that he was going to see, like who they necessarily were.
hmm
But he finds another job and like kind of intercepts it and pretends like he's somebody else on the job, and like that's what the rest of the comic series goes off on. And
Okay.
so his righteous thirst for vengeance is to stop like the next hit, I guess.
I'm gonna
But
try to use the name of the comic book in when I'm talking about it as much as possible, like you are. I love it.
yeah, I like titles.
Hey,
um,
it's a good one because it's one of them. I remember that I can picture it on my comic book shop shelf, and I know the one that you're talking about. And so even when you talk about a new character being on the cover, I remember that just from seeing it on the shelf. So
yeah.
cover is a good title. Yeah, it's super important.
Well, and it was also like the cover of the first issue is what drew me to it.
Okay,
And I didn't, I saw the picture of Benedict Wong
all those
in
bricks.
bricks. So I saw that picture. I'm like, oh, this looks interesting. And then I saw the title. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. And so I
Mm,
picked it up. But like one of my favorite things about this comic is like how little they actually use dialogue. And
okay.
so like a
Oh,
lot
thank
of it,
God.
yeah, and like a lot of it is just based on like a picture says 1,000 words. Like you're building
Mm.
the wordage of the story as you're going along frame by frame, and then like the conversations, like they're few and far in between, and like add to the story more.
I
And
think.
I haven't set down one of these issues without being like, I just want the next one to be out. And
Mm,
so uh yeah, and I think the next one actually might be coming out next week.
what issue is it on?
It's I think issue 6 just came out. That's what it was. So one
Okay.
just came out. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. So you were mentioning that the first volume just wrapped up. Going back to what you're just talking about a picture being worth 1,000 words. I love a good uh, comic that can do that. We read
Yeah.
one recently that I feel that really did that, was called Chicken Devil.
Oh
Um,
yes.
I feel like Chicken Devil did a really good job of just summing up, just using little words and just using art. And I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
that's someone. It gives so much. You know it allows a writer of a comic and an artist of a comic to actually like work together and to be like to tell the story, because I feel like it's so easy to just rely on either thought bubbles or the inner dialogue boxes or whatever, and just
Yeah.
tell what's happening instead of just having a good real like art that shows reactions and settings and all those kind of things that set up supplies and stuff like that, that would need to
Yeah.
be mentioned in dialogue.
Yeah.
And that's the
So
point of having a comic book.
yeah. Well, and I also, to throw this out there, I was listening to a podcast where Chuck Palahniuk was the guest
Okay.
on it, and Chuck Palahniuk, if you don't know, he's the author of Fight Club. You know,
Right. Yeah.
classic movie, but also a classic novel first, or instant classic. Um,
Hmm.
but he's also gotten into doing comic books, I guess, in the last few years. I kind of like have fallen off on like following him, but I read a
Sure.
lot of
Well,
his
that's
like early
Fight Club two
novels.
and three were graphic novels.
Yeah, so it got turned into a graphic novel, but
No, I
he
think it was. I think two, no, two and three were just
oh,
graphic novels.
I see. I see
Yeah,
what you're saying.
because
Yeah.
I think with Fight Club, he's like, this is a better way of telling a story, and a graphic novel was a good medium between that.
Yeah, but he was
And
talking
because
about
it's
like yeah,
go,
but
go ahead.
sorry. So he was talking about how much he actually enjoys doing comic books because like the building blocks for storytelling are already there. And it's like
Hmm.
he basically was just saying like every 2 pages you're supposed to have like a page turner at the end of like the bottom right corner for every 2 pages because you want to keep people going, and it's like such a simple process that's just like really fun and exciting, and you can just do so much with a comic book that you really can't do with like books and novels.
Right.
um
Absolutely.
and so yeah, like I kind of want to find these comics that he has put out over the last couple of years. I don't know how many he's done, but
I'm sure they're fantastic. He's a great storyteller.
they
All right,
are.
man. You ready for another comic?
Yeah, let's hear it. What is it?
This one I'm pretty stoked on. So this is called The Fourth Man. Here's issue
Ooh,
one.
let me
It's
back it up a
a
bit.
kind of look
Okay,
like
I like that cover a lot.
yeah, it's pretty great. And the second one is good
Bloody
too. And it's
Noodle
just
Man.
a bloody inflatable tube man.
Yeah,
So okay, there's issue two. So you got a guy dragging a body in front of a used car dealer lot. Fourth
that's
man.
very like pulp noir.
Dude,
Like,
I love Pope Noirs and I love comic book Pope Noirs. So like I am all about this. This is by Jeff McComsey and Mike Diodato Jr. Again, I'm all about him, and Lee Loveright, the same dude who doing art for this did art for Not All Robots.
huh?
So again, same kind of stuff, beautiful, realistic art, heavy ink, very dark gothic noir. Like it's just if that's up your alley, then like this is what you want. Um, so okay, so uh, Jeff, I forget, I just had it. Jeff McMoney, whatever it was. Uh,
McMahon.
he wrote this comic called Grendel, Kentucky, and that's from Upshot Studios as well as this. Um, and Grendel, Kentucky was about a weed farm in Kentucky and a
Nice.
biker gang from Pennsylvania. So it was just like it was one of the first comics I bought when I started buying comics again. So it was a nice introduction into indie comics because I obviously was buying a lot of Marvel and stuff, but I really wanted to start reading indie, and this one really jumped out at me because I love marijuana and I love comics, and I love a good horror comic, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's a little bit what that was. So this one's a little bit more of a crime thriller, The Fourth Man. So the whole premise is that there's three bodies in a small town morgue, and they have a big city detective come in because they're not used to having that many murders within a small period of time. And so it's called the Fourth Man. So it's implying that there's going to be a fourth victim. So it's kind of setting up over these three issues, how, who this fourth person is going to be, and trying to solve the case by that time, or what I guess. I'm assuming that that's where it's going to go. But it's very interesting because it shows each issue, at least the first two, and I assume that the third one is going to be the same way. Is it a gives the 24 hours of the lead up to the character's death, and you can kind of see what was happening in the world around him, but you don't see who killed him. But you know
Huh.
that they're going to die because at the beginning of the issue, they're already laying there dead. So, and again, it's already telling you that there's three dead people. You're hearing the story. It's kind of building a narrative behind it. Um, and I can't remember when issue three is coming out, but it's on issue two already. And I am
March
really looking.
23rd.
There you go, March 23rd. So coming up. I'm really looking forward to going back and rereading these first two issues before going into that, because this is the type of comic that you want to do that with, because
Yeah.
there's so many like just hints in the comic itself, in the art of like stuff that's happening. So it's good to have that fresh reminder in your head before going into the next issue. But it's only four issues. So depending on when this podcast comes out, I would either pick up pick up the single issues, or just wait for the trade paperback. But yeah, I'm all about this book. So definitely want to check that one out.
Checking it out. I'm adding them to my cart.
Look at that. All right, Mark, how about you? Do you got another one for us, buddy?
Oh yeah, buddy.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
oh yeah. Another one that I'm like really enjoying, and I've talked with you about. But it's also it's a bit cliche, but I kind of like cliche sometimes because they're just,
Sure.
I don't know, it's fun to read. But the
Cliches are
series
good
is
too.
called Last Flight Out, put out by Dark
Nice.
Horse. Yeah.
Nice.
It's kind of, I'm trying to remember how I described it to you initially, but it's the end of the world. I mean, a lot of indie comics are about like, oh, we're approaching the apocalypse or
Or
whatever.
it's
And
post
so
apocalyptic.
yeah, and the main character is just like, he's like the Iron Man genius like, there's no superheroes in this. He's just a regular genius guy with no superpowers or super suits or anything. Who's neglected his family because he's been the one in charge of like saving humans from planet Earth. Um, but one person who doesn't show up for the last flight out, which he's on as well, is his daughter. And so
Mm,
he doesn't want to keep being the bad dad, and so he goes out on a hunt to like find his daughter.
that's a
um
good premise. I mean,
yeah,
it does seem like a disaster movie, but it's a good, it seems more realistic than like a lot of them, because it's just like you're just a bad dad. But it's like, well, yeah, of course you would be preoccupied with saving humanity, you know?
yeah. Well, and like one of the things I really like about this series though is just like, I feel like I know the characters even if they're like just side characters. They're just they build the conversations in so well and just structure the storytelling so well that like, even if it might be too wordy and sometimes too cliche, like just the dialogue between the characters and what they're going through is just, that's what pulls me into it. Because I mean, you know me, I like things that connect.
Sure.
And I
Yeah.
just feel like this one just vibes really well with like the continuity, and then just making you kind of feel like, yeah, I understand these characters because in a way this it's part of the clichéness of it, that like they're it seems like every character is already built off of a character that we already know from some other comic or TV show from way back when.
Okay.
But regardless, Dark Horse rarely seems to like fail me on
Hmm.
anything. Just because I don't know, I might be because I'm up in the Northwest with them, but I might
Sure.
have a bit of a bias. But
That's funny. I was so on the fence about getting that when it came out, and I feel like the time when that was coming out, I was just buying comics out the ass, so I had to like
yeah,
pick and choose what I wanted. But that's definitely one I think I'll probably pick up the trade paperback, and like just
yeah,
get like have a nice stoned Saturday afternoon and just like plow through it. How many
yeah.
issues do you say there was?
I think that there's been 5 out so far, and
Okay.
I I doubt it's a continuing series.
Yeah, it seems pretty. I mean, even the name of it, "The Last Flight Out," like that seems kind of, you couldn't really. You'd have to do something with that if you did a second arc.
Yeah. Okay. So there's going to be 6 issues total, and 4 of them are out, and the next one comes out next week.
Did you say who was writing it and who was doing the art?
Uh, I will.
I believe you. You can find it somewhere along.
It's right here in front of me. Here we go. So it's written by Mark Guggenheim. The
Okay.
colorist is Marcelo Costa. Uh,
Mm.
I'm not actually familiar with any of these names.
Yeah, me
Um,
neither.
but let's see. Let's look at the writer. See what else he's done. Oh, oh. This will be a good segue for later in the show. But his next up comic, which comes out next week, and it will be in my pull box, and I'm looking forward to it, is the Star Wars Han Solo and Chewbacca #1.
Oh, I was thinking about getting that. Should I?
Yeah,
Okay. If you're getting it, I'll get it, and we'll talk about it then.
yeah, but he's credited with he's done some amazing Spider-Man for a long time. He did 99 to 2013. He did some amazing Spider-Man issues.
Nice.
Done so he's done looks like he's done quite a bit of Marvel. Yeah,
Sick.
yeah.
All right, I'm definitely gonna get that Hanzo and Chewbacca. Just even if it is just to have that first issue, I'm probably just gonna pick that up.
Yeah, hopefully it'll hopefully it'll expand upon the okay Star Wars movie Solo.
Oh my goodness. All right, man. Oh well, you mind if I do another one?
Yeah, hop on in there.
All right, sick. This one I'm really excited about because I really love the premise of it, and I feel like you will too. So this is I'll show you issue. I have issue 1 and 4 in front of me right now. So this is issue 1 right here. I'll try to.
Ooh,
Yeah. So again, a
yeah,
very noir heavy. This is like super noir.
yeah,
So it's by Chip Zdarsky and Jacob Phillips. Chip Zdarsky did I think the previous Daredevil run. He was on Daredevil for a really long time. I actually have a book up here. I don't think you can see it of Daredevil that he wrote. The This was the No Devils, Only God, Fear God. That whole series. That time when Daredevil was he accidentally killed a guy and
yeah.
he was like dealing with the consequences morally of that and all that stuff. But yeah, he was the writer for that, and he's also going to be taking on Batman soon.
Ooh.
So I'm going to be. I mean, I think you read Batman. I don't read like
I
any
I
DC.
haven't I haven't been I haven't been keeping up with DC because the last time I actually subscribed to any DC comics was when the new 52 came out, and that was about 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
Uh, and like it was like fun, but it's kind of I don't know. DC kind of went through already what I feel like Marvel's going through now with comics, and where
Elaborate.
it's just like a lot of regurgitation, um,
Mm.
and like and again that's hard not that's hard for like DC and Marvel not to do because they've been working with the same
Yeah.
characters for so long.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know.
I'm,
Like I want to get back into Batman because Batman was like my. I'm going to go back to our introduction. I'm pretty sure that my first comic was a Batman comic because I remember watching the first Tim Burton Batman with Michael Keaton when I was like a young kid, and being like, "That shit's cool." And so I'm pretty sure it was probably like a Batman comic.
That's funny.
But um,
Yeah.
and then also with the new Batman movie coming out, I think this
Mm,
might be a turnaround time for DC. Hopefully, at least with the TV and movie
yeah.
area of their media. But
Let's
I know
hope
that
so.
yeah. So we'll see. But
Anyways, when he jumps on that, I'm probably gonna jump on that. So we'll be talking about it then, I'm sure. But
yeah,
I want to say also with Jacob Phillips, who's doing the art for this. Jacob Phillips, I can actually open one of these and show you the art on the inside. I love Jacob Phillips' art style, man, because I love like it's just very comic booky. Um, Here, try that.
Oh yeah, kind of like that classic.
Yeah, very classic. Like you can tell that they're cartoon people, but they look like people. Like I love it. It's just fantastic. He does the art on a book called That Texas Blood, which I have right here. If you look at the screen, this one is
Uh-huh.
actually signed by the Chris Coden, who is the author of that. So I'm very stoked about that. But
That's awesome.
um,
How many
Jacob
side
Phillips,
covers do you have?
I think one, just that one.
Oh, okay,
Um,
I thought maybe you
no,
had
and I
more.
have
I have zero, so
I'm beating you, buddy. We'll see who can win by the end of this podcast.
all
But
right.
uh, but no, so they just Jacob Phillips. Anytime his name's on something, I usually grab it just because I'm such a sucker for good art, and his art is just always just it's just continually good, solid
Yeah.
work.
I'm looking at
Uh,
his stuff right now. So he that Texas Blood, which you have behind you. For
yeah,
Boom Studios, he did regarding the matter of Oswald's body. I
yeah,
haven't heard of that, but like
that's
the
an
cover.
interesting one. It's about it's about some interesting group wants to do something with Oswald's body, Lee Harvey Oswald's body.
Oh, I remember you talking about that actually
Yeah, I
a
never read
while
it, but
back.
it looks
It
interesting.
it looks interesting. And then he
I
did
mean,
Newburn and then Criminal, and then he has a new there's a new series out called Breakout by Dark Horse where he did a cover for them. So
nice. Okay, so Newburn is about a man named like Easton Newburn, whatever. It's just this gentleman on his knees right here. He's the main character,
uh-huh.
and he is a PI for the mafia. So whenever
Oh,
something happens in the
interesting.
mafia that they don't understand, he gets hired for the case. So the first issue, there's a hit put out on somebody and they don't know who it is, so he's put in charge of figuring out who's on the hit. And
Huh.
it's very interesting because it shows him like working alongside police because he used to be a police officer, and he hires a young black woman named Emily to work with him as his assistant, and it's yeah, just a really cool premise. It's beautiful art. I'm really excited to see where it goes. It seems like it's going to be ongoing, but no guarantees yet. But even if it's just one volume, so far it's very enjoyable.
I'm looking at it right now. Newburn is gonna be 7 issues.
Okay, so yeah, then that makes sense because it is a little bit of a like there hasn't it's still world building and it's on issue 4, so that would make sense that it's gonna start ramping up to some climactic build up at the moment. But yeah, Chip Zdarsky is doing this thing called the All Nighters on Comixology, and I really enjoyed that. It's like vampires and Kick Ass meet each other. It's
Ooh.
really, yeah, it's really
Oh,
good.
I got an advertisement for that.
Yeah, check it out, man. It's really interesting. They work in an all night diner because they're vampires. So it's
yeah,
just
yeah,
it's
it's right
really
here in front
entertaining.
of me.
It's a Comixology exclusive, and even though Comixology isn't like the app is a little funky right now, I
Yeah.
would still recommend checking that out. Supporting, I was going to say supporting our boy, like he knows this exists. Supporting our boy Chip Zdarsky. Uh,
Me
yeah.
and him
All right,
go
man.
way
Well,
back.
how you feeling? Do you want to do? Do you want to talk about one more real quick, or do you want to just go right into the big one?
Let's go into the big one because I can always talk about the other one next time.
Alrighty, that works.
And the latest issue of the next one I was going to talk about just came out, and I do kind of want to read it. Um,
Sure.
so next time we do this, I'll bring it up.
So
Um,
I guess the like broad way that we're going to be doing this is we'll kind of do what we just did is just talk about some comics that we're feeling fancy about, and then we're going to talk about a bigger comic or like an arc or something like that that we've been reading together and discuss that. Sounds good to
yeah,
you?
sounds good. So yeah, this big one that we're going to be talking about it actually comes from Marvel, and it's not what you think. It has to do with Star Wars, and it's right there.
Woo!
Tim's pointing at it. Um, if you haven't been reading the Star Wars comics, they've been so much more rewarding, at least
Oh
for
my
me as a
goodness.
Star Wars fan.
Hmm.
Especially lately, and especially since they did this series called War of the Bounty Hunters. It was the crossover arc between all of the series that were out at the moment, which was the regular Star Wars run, Darth Vader, Dr. Aphra, bounty hunters, and then there was mentions even of High Republic stuff, but I wouldn't say that they actually crossed over at all. Um,
No.
but
And they had like solo issues just for it because I don't think I have it at the moment, but I have the trade paperback of the War of the Bounty Hunters, and I also have a bunch of the like single one-off issues that were
yeah,
just random characters that I can't even remember the name of, but like just random bounty hunters and stuff like
yeah.
that.
So and all those bounty hunters, so that like was Zukos and Forlom and
Right, those are the ones I was trying to think of, but I was gonna say like Zorkloff, but that's not right.
yeah. And so if you're wondering who these bounty hunters are and who's warring, it's if you've ever seen Empire Strikes Back, then you've seen them on screen before.
Right,
Because when we first see Boba Fett and Bosk, it's the other bounty hunters that are with them in that scene, and they're all warring for really the rights to Han Solo.
right.
Um, and the story basically picks up right after Empire Strikes Back. Boba Fett's on his way to Tatooine, and then uh, he meets a disaster.
So, I okay. My I okay. My biggest qualm with this is the name because it seems just from the name alone, it would seem to imply that they're like constantly fighting and like constantly going at it. But there seems
Yeah,
to be just kind of like one real confrontation after at the end, and like it seems very similar to like what's that The Hobbit, where it's like they spend all the time building up like these armies or whatever, and then at the end they kind of meet, similar
yeah.
to that. But
Oh, it
man,
is. It's a ton of buildup.
oh
Yeah,
my goodness. But I really enjoyed the way that I read this because I just waited until it all came out and then just like bought bought two trade paperbacks and then bought just all the other stuff on Comixology and just plowed through it in order that it was released. And
yeah,
yeah, I really enjoyed going through it like that. I just really want to say this too, just out of nowhere because you already said it. But if you're a Star Wars fan and you're not reading the Star Wars comics, then you're depriving yourself of really good content
you're
because
missing out.
oh my gosh, I
Yeah,
haven't read much of the newer Star Wars stuff, but like that's what's coming out, and honestly, it's because I'm like scared. I'm like, oh my god, what if it stops being good? But
yeah,
like all the old Star Wars arc that takes place between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, that's all good stuff. So
yeah.
yeah. Um,
No, and
so
and if you have to pick just one, I would recommend doing Darth Vader.
oh really? Would that be? See, I would go main Star Wars story, but that does get a little repetitive towards the end. But
Yeah,
that's just my humble opinion on it.
yeah. Well, I really like the mainline series for Star Wars in the comics, but the only thing I don't like about it is that it's a series that kind of jumps around between like our main three original characters. So like sometimes the focus is on Luke, sometimes
Hmm.
it's on Leia, sometimes it's on Han and Chewie, and then sometimes they're all together in it. But it just kind of makes you want like, why don't you just do a Star Wars Luke Skywalker and a Star Wars Han Solo and a
Mm,
Star Wars Leia, which they've kind of done like some small issues of before, but
those are
I
usually
think
just
I
one-off stories of like Leia going and doing like a whatever, while
yeah,
like yeah. And I
yeah,
think that's one of the great things about Star Wars is that you can take just a day in the life of Leia and make it a full volume arc because they live
yeah,
such radical lives. And so, anyways, let's get into the War of the Bounty Hunter.
yes.
Um, we're I so you what were you reading building up to this? Because I'm not reading, like I said, any of the Star Wars stuff, but were you reading kind of some arcs
Yeah.
into
No, so all I actually I was subscribed to the main line and Darth Vader going into War of the Bounty Hunters. And then
okay.
I started getting Bounty Hunters and Dr. Aphra into my pull box as well. and I really, really like Dr. Aphra. I think she might be my favorite like comic book Star Wars character.
Okay.
She's kind of like this rogue, kind of Indiana Jones type character, um,
Yeah.
who
And she's
just
a little
like
bit of like an anti-hero, right? Because I've
she's
read
yeah,
some of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's very much an anti-hero. She's very much like a firecracker. You just don't really know whose side she's ever going to be on, and she's very impulsive. So
She seems like a little bit of the original trilogy main three wrapped up together. Is that
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
yeah? And that's
Um,
not. I mean, that's not bad. That's a great character to sell.
yeah. But then also like bounty hunters, I at first didn't really want to get into bounty hunters because I didn't really like the lead character. I don't really know how to say his name because I've only ever
Half
read
metal
it.
face man.
Yeah, but his
Yeah.
so I've heard people say his name's Valence, but I've also heard Valence.
Mhm.
Um,
Sure.
but anyways,
Half metal face man.
he dates back to like the 70s comics of Star Wars. Like that's where his origin
Really?
comes from. Yeah.
I mean, that
Which,
makes sense because he looks like a man that was date like in the 70s. They're like, what if he's in space but he's a robot face?
yeah.
Right.
But yeah, his whole story arc's just been great too since they brought him into like the main line. And but just having those four issues, and then you had the main War of the Bounty Hunters as well. So there's really week to week I was looking forward to like 2 to 3 comics that had to do with the same story for a
Right.
while, which is
That's pretty
which is
cool.
like really, really fun. And then when when War of the Bounty Hunters ended, it was like, oh, I'm not getting as much good stuff anymore. But
Yeah, you're probably saving yourself a nickel too. I
oh,
mean, that's
yeah,
I mean that's part of the
definitely,
reason why I don't enjoy reading Marvel is because they'll make you do like you have to buy like anything that has the name on it, you know?
yeah,
Because it might loosely tie in. But with this, I felt like it. I rarely got. There was a couple of issues like I'm like, why am I reading this? Because this has like nothing to do with this. But for the most part, I would say like 80% of it was, or 90% probably had was just story and it had stuff to do with the content. Let's. I don't even know if we got into this, but I guess this probably it's okay to spoil this a little bit, I think, but it is Crimson Dawn from the movie Solo, who is
Mhm.
edited by Emily. I forget that.
Amelia
What's her?
Clark.
It's Claire, right? In the comic,
Yeah,
in
Claire.
the
She's yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's Claire, but it's spelled in a Star Warsian way, right?
Oh, her Star Wars name is
Yeah, isn't it?
it's Kira.
Isn't it? Oh, I thought it was Claire for some reason.
No, it's
Kira. It is
Kira.
my bad.
Kira.
Um,
No worries.
but
I admitted to not knowing if it's Valence or Valence. So
that's true.
yeah.
Um, but I thought it was really interesting to see Red Dawn together with Boba Fett, together with Jabba the Hutt, together with Darth Vader, together with all Luke,
Mhm.
Leia, Chewie, and there's a lot of Lando in this because there's no Han Solo, and that was really interesting for me when I was reading this because I'm like, oh yeah, just there's gonna be no Han Solo in between in this whole arc of comics, and that's
Yeah.
probably why they're doing the Chewie and the Han thing so they can have their fix of Han Solo. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because he's just not going to be able to be because he's frozen right now, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and like that's the other thing too is that War of the Bounty Hunters gave birth to a lot of other series now. So like now there's the Crimson Reign series is out. I think it's only like a
Okay,
three
yeah,
issue arc, but it's still just kind of feeding back in and like giving life to this thing that we first met in the Solo movie. Um,
right.
And the other thing too, just like going back to Amelia Clark, she also had, this is kind of an offshoot, but she had her comic book out not too long ago.
Yeah,
Mother of
mom.
Madness. Yeah, mom.
Yeah.
That was I did you finish that?
I never even read it. I just bought the first issue because I'm like, well, I should probably buy this as a collector.
Yeah.
But I
It
never read
was
it. Was
it
it
was
good?
it was interesting. I liked it.
Interesting?
It's
Okay.
uh I mean
Because
she's very much what
that came out the same time as like Berserker, I'm pretty sure, right?
it was along the same like I think Berserker started a little bit before,
Before,
but
yeah.
yeah, another comic done by a movie star.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I going back to the War of the Bounty Hunters, I love the Hutts. I think they're such a fascinating creatures or species because
Oh yeah,
they're slugs that are just criminals. And I you get to see a decent amount of Hut stuff, but and also it kind of explains why you don't see more Huts in the movies. I mean that's a little bit of a spoiler. We won't get into it, but it's I just love the world of Star Wars and being able to like play around in that world more and like be able to think about the fact that like uh Vader was Luke was leading Vader away from this whole thing while and trying to
yeah.
cause a divergence while like and thinking about those things in between the movies. I That's a lot of fun for me. Just the fact that you get to fill in the blanks like that.
Yeah. No, and it's been yeah, the whole thing was just really fun. Like the other thing that I really like too that they did with War of the Bounty Hunters really well was when they would tell one story through like the eyes of Darth Vader. But then like next week Star Wars issue came out and it was the same story, but it was from like Luke's perspective.
Right.
And
I thought
and
that yeah.
and they
I
did
thought
that
that
a
was really
lot.
interesting.
They did that a lot throughout this series, where it was even just like maybe the way one comic book ended uh, was the start of another comic book, but again from a different point of view.
Yeah.
And they did that all so well and like blending it together. It's just like I'm sure they're gonna come out with an omnibus for it, but it's like yeah, I'm gonna buy that when it comes out because
Right. Well,
probably won't
it's one of
read
those
it.
things I would I would love to sit in on the writing uh whatever of that because the writing room or pitching it because it would be the main whoever's doing the main stories. I forget the name. I had them down somewhere, but you'd have those guys being like, here's what we're gonna do, and then here's the events happening within it, and then Dr. Afra or bounty hunters, wherever you're coming into the story, you have an opportunity to see it from your perspective and to write it from that character's perspective. That's great
Yeah,
because then you get like the people who are on those stories, who know those characters, who are writing those characters, they get to see this is how Doctor Alpha, uh, the Skywalkers, however they would respond to these things, and I think that's fantastic.
I want to say that Charles Scholl was behind it. Um, he's had his
Okay,
hands on quite a bit of Star Wars when it comes just to like the literary media because I think he was also the author of the first two novels for the High Republic, and then I think he was
okay,
also doing maybe the Darth Vader line at the same time.
nice.
Um, but yeah, he might be like the guy who was kind of behind it all, but we'll have to look back into that a little bit more.
Yeah,
But yeah, the writing though, it's just it's for me it was just so cohesive. Like I don't know how many names are attached to the entire project, but if you read the whole thing through, it really does just seem like it was just a wide collaboration where people are like this is really fun and people are going to enjoy it.
yeah, man. Because I'm telling you, the way that I read it, like sitting down and just kind of shotgunning, I read probably I can't remember how many issues there are in total connected to it. Probably in the 20s, probably close to 30, something like that.
You got to
But
think, yeah,
so
it
I read
might be more.
well, we could pull it up or just whatever. But I mean, it's at least over 20, and I shotgunned at least probably easily over 20 in that first day, and it was great because it didn't. There was a lot of different art and different, in perspectives from the characters, but like you're saying, it did feel like it was one just giant story, just kind of told over these these several different arcs going on at the same time, and you know, I did say that it's a lot of fun to see what happens and cannot and to make canon these things in between the movies, but it's also kind of scary because it's like this is the new Star Wars canon. So it's
Yeah,
just like whatever happens now is what happens. And so
yeah,
like now canonically, they've fought over and Boba Fett lost. Han
yeah.
Solo for a little bit. It's cool, but it's also scary to like trudge through this territory because of what if it's bad and then then you have to bring
One,
Boba
yeah.
Fett.
One thing though I want to like kind of speak into is as far as the canon of Star Wars and comics is that I think that there's a tier to what has like greater authority in canon.
Mm-hmm.
Because something that I've noticed in watching everything that's come out on Disney Plus is that like if they're telling a story that's already happened in the comics and they're reusing it in the show, it if it's altered at all, that's changing canon.
Mm-hmm.
And so like for instance, like Kanan Jarrus had a comic book series out a couple years ago, and it was him and his master having to fight off Order 66, and he escaped. And then
I
the
actually
rest of
have that
his
right over there.
yeah, but then
Yeah.
his story unfolds in Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
But then when Bad Batch season 1 starts off, it tells an entirely different story. But something I kind of like about it that like I'm okay with it on is that we know how eyewitness accounts work, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
we could see the same event, but our details could vary quite differently, and it's just it's kind of okay for me that like the Kane and Jarrus like comic book series and the Bad Batch are kind of the same story but told differently. I think that's okay because yeah, you're gonna leave out some details when you're trying to recall an event, especially one where there's like a shit ton of blasters going off, and you're just like, oh,
Right.
what do I do?
Yeah,
So
it's traumatic and it's confusing. Like your droid or your these people
yeah,
are turning on you, the clone troopers, whatever it is.
yeah. But
Um,
then another thing, and this doesn't have to do with War of Bounty Hunters. Sorry, I keep going on tangents, but on the same note, something I'm a little confused on in this same field of what's more canon, the comics or the movies and shows. Obviously, the movies and shows, but uh, I'm sorry if I'm spoiling the Book of Boba Fett for anybody, but the fact that Yoda's lightsaber showed up
yeah,
is kind of a big deal because Yoda's lightsaber was destroyed in the Darth Vader comics.
was it really?
Yeah, Masamita threw it into like a burning pit where they had taken all the
Okay,
lightsabers to the Jedi, and it was the one he like held up in the air and was just
yeah,
like, the Jedi are never going to rule us again or whatever, and he like tossed Yoda's lightsaber into the burner. But you could also just say, oh, that wasn't Yoda's lightsaber; it just looked like his.
right,
So
yeah, and that is a little bit of a bummer. But I think even with like the MCU and Star Wars is definitely getting there. It's just like once you start trying to cover every corner, you're eventually gonna start running into each other. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And it's just gonna be a little bit, but Marvel Comics for years hasn't really changed its continuity. It revamps it every once in a while, but it's still kind of that overarching same thing. And it's like,
yeah.
well, yeah, of course you're gonna have contradicting stories or ideas about characters because it's been fucking over 40 years. Like you're just gonna have even if you live your life, you're gonna come into contradictory stories or arcs in yourself. You know what I
I
mean?
contradict my own life story all the time.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's go back to the Book of Boba Fett. What do you think your favorite part of that was? Like, just you don't have to spoil anything, but what was your favorite thing that you remember getting from the comic?
um, I mean, honestly, I didn't really enjoy it until the last 3 episodes. So I'll break it up into that. The first 4 episodes, like, were just kind of like they were just fodder to me. It's like
Oh,
they had.
I meant of the War of the Bounty Hunters.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Like
Well, you should
episodes.
be apologizing. You're the one who said Book of Boba Fett. So,
Yeah, I'm sure I
but
did. I was thinking of bad things.
yeah.
Um,
But no, okay. So War of the Bounty Hunters. Really, honestly, what I liked the most about it was just like there were so many different like trajectories of stories going on from the moment that it started.
mhm,
And like, I mean, I described the first issue a little bit, but it's just like, in the first issues, they're all called preludes. So like,
mhm,
they're not like we're not into this yet, and so all these preludes are just these separate accounts that happen, but then they all kind of intertwine and move forward together in the rest of War of the Bounty Hunters. And
right.
so you just have all these different characters who are lovable and like you want to root for, and sometimes I mean, like when you have the Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker face-offs throughout War of the Bounty Hunters, it's just like what's going to
Mm,
happen? Are they actually going to have? Are they going to fight? Like, are they going to
mhm,
come face to face together? Um, and I don't know, just the way that like all of that played out, and like when comic book characters from just the different series like would meet together. Um,
mhm.
I don't know. It was just exciting. It was like better than when like TV shows cross over.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I I'm glad you brought up the Luke and Vader chasing, uh, that whole thing. Because I brought it up a little bit earlier, but that honestly is probably one of my favorite things that happened during the the arc. So this takes place a lot in Star Wars issue 17, and
Oh yeah.
I have it because I really love this art. It is
That's actually, I think that's my favorite cover of the entire series.
Dude, me too. I love this. I went out and I bought this digitally so I could read it, just when I was reading it. And I just saw this cover and I'm just like, man, I have to have that because it's just so cool to see. It's again, it's a new canon of Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader doing stuff together.
Yeah.
And so this whole issue is just them. And I really love it, especially it feels like an old school comic because it's a single arc that takes place. It's a single issue that takes place within a bigger arc, kind of really wraps up the story, tells the story, wraps it up within it. It's a little bit self-contained, and like you can see the cover on it, and like what's gonna happen. And it's like those old comics where you would see like the villain punching the hero. You knew that they were gonna fight, but like you're getting
Yeah.
a different view of it that you wouldn't have gotten within the thing. So
Yeah.
I really love that. I was a big fan of the whole thing. I would give it like a 90%. I don't know if we're gonna do a rating system or anything, but it was a a material for me.
Yeah. No, and it was just very exciting. If I'll give it a percentage too, I'm going to give it a 93.
There you go. Man,
um,
you got three better than me, you bastard.
yeah, yeah. But no, it just, if you haven't read it and you want to, I think the best way to do it is just get a monthly subscription to Marvel Unlimited. So
Hmm.
I think a month is like $6.
Yeah, something
Um,
like that.
yeah, and so you could pay $6 and you could read all of them just straight through like Tim did.
Right.
I read them issue by issue, which was again going back to how we talked about how excited you get about what's in your pull box. While
Hmm.
this whole Star Wars event was going on, I was just very very excited. Um,
Awesome.
right now for me, it's actually what's going on with the High Republic Star Wars series is where I'm just like I'm very much looking forward to reading that next one.
Oh yeah,
Um,
is that good? I jumped off
yeah,
that so quick.
yeah.
I think I still have it up. Yeah, I still have number one up here on my wall, but I jumped off so quick.
Yeah, but the other thing that I would say about High Republic is if you're not also like reading or listening to the novels, it's not going to make as much sense because like that's something that
Really?
they're trying to do with High Republic, as far as I know, is just keep it all literary. So it's all just going to be
Mm,
novels and comic books. You're not, I don't like, supposedly not going to see any TV shows. The closest thing we
yeah,
have is like the Acolyte is supposed to take place as like that kind of transition piece to when the High Republic ends and the next phase of Star Wars begins. Um,
gotcha.
and so I think that's
Interesting.
all we'll get out of High Republic for like digital viewership, whatever TV
Right,
shows
yeah,
and movies.
sure.
But yeah, High Republic's pretty exciting, and it's just you have a shit ton of Jedi who are fighting this like dark force that just came out of nowhere.
Okay,
So
all right. Maybe I'll have to jump on that or just get Marvel, and it might be on Comixology
it's
too.
probably
But
on Comixology too.
yeah.
That's pretty. They're pretty good about also having some of those things for free. So or
All
not
right,
free,
man.
but
Well,
in subscription.
right, yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's you want to land this plane.
yeah, we probably should.
All
How do
right,
we
man.
land?
Well,
I've never
do you
landed a
want to
plane.
Do you want to just say we're well? Thank you so much if you're still listening. Thank you so much for listening and watching through this. We hope that you enjoyed it. What are you reading? We would love to hear what you're reading because, yeah, like I said earlier, we can only read so many comics in a day, and I'd love to know what
Yeah,
you're reading, what you think of it, and if you've read the War of the Bounty Hunter, Last Flight Out, Not All Robots, any of the ones that we mentioned tonight. Yeah, we'd love to hear what you have to say about those.
yeah. Let's keep the conversation going on comics.
So, where can people find you on social media, Mark?
Mostly right now, I'm working with my TikTok. which is it's at Mark and Sixth. I don't know.
All
You can spell it out. If you can spell Mark and then the word in and then spell out sixth, like in sixth place or in
right.
sixth gear,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that's where I'm mostly at.
Okay.
Otherwise, and I'll probably connect my Instagram to it.
Yeah.
So
Make we'll get social media social media for all this stuff. I don't know what that would be. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Stoned and Nerdy. So if you want to just go over there and follow me, we'll probably get to a place where we're posting all the comics that we pull for a week online on either on our personal pages or on a social media, a shared
yeah,
one, so you can check those out. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. So I had a lot of fun doing this first one. So
yeah,
yeah,
and we'll keep going up with this.
alrighty, we'll keep going up. That's gonna be our catchphrase: is keep going up.
Keep going up, man.
Keep going up. All right, thanks everybody. We
Thanks,
will see
everyone.
you next time.
All right, bye.